All right, so a proper, enticing investor pitch deck for a low budget indie film. Now, let me just set the stage for that. When I say low budget indie film, I'm talking about films that are going to be made for $1 million or less. All right. Once you start getting into a million and a half, two and a half, five, it's a different type of narrative and a different type of investment scenario. So the $1 million or less scenario, the setup's going to be a little bit different, and the pitch is going to be a little bit different, and the type of investor is going to be a little bit different because you're going to be asking for less money than if you're asking for $5 million. So I'm specifically talking about $1 million or less. Now, a lot of filmmakers who are probably listening are going to make films for $200,000 or less. It's going to be what I call micro budget films. So anything from, if you're talking anything less than 50,000, then you're not really getting investors. That's going to be donors. But anything above that, where you intend to give a return to your investors, up to say $1 million, what I'm about to say, I think pertains really well. All right. So you're going to go to these high net worth individuals, otherwise known as, angel investors or rich people. And this is what they need to hear. All right. Now, this is my experience. And I have done this 9 times for 9 indie feature films, all in the budget range of between 500 and $1 million. Those are the films that I make. So here's what a typical investment deck is going to look like. It's going to have about 15 or 16 slides. The first slide is, "Hi, how are you? My name's Jeff Deverett. I'm a filmmaker, and I make films. Here's the next film that I'm making." All right, next slide. "The title of the film is so and so. Here's the log line." And when I say log line, I mean one sentence, folks. A log line is one sentence. And by the way, if you can't say what your film is in one sentence, then you don't even know what your film is. Trust me, if you spend enough time, you'll figure out how to say what your film is in one sentence. Now, why one sentence? It's because you have to assume, even though this isn't necessarily true, you have to assume that these high net worth individuals are all ADHD. All right. They have attention deficit disorder, ADD. They're going to, even though these are very successful people, have a lot of money, just assume this, okay? It's probably not true in most cases, but assume that you have to speak very quickly, very succinctly, could not go into a lot of details, because they're going to lose attention. They're going to stop paying attention to you. All right. So when you describe what your movie is, you say, "Here's the title. Here's one sentence log line of what it's about." And then on your deck, below that, you'll have a 3 sentence synopsis. But you don't need to read the synopsis, because the one sentence log line should do it, and put a photo on. Put a sort of a graphic, your key art. You should have key art. All right. So a poster. So between the log line and the poster in the title, they should know what your story is about. That's it. Now, the next slide is going to be about the making of the movie. Here's how much it's going to cost to make it. Let's say it's $750,000 to make it. We want to start develop. We want to shoot it, in June of 2025. Therefore, we're going to need the money 3 months before, because we're going to do post production. So you give a little bit of a timeline, very, very simple timeline. When you need the money, when you're going to shoot it, when it's going to be finished, when you're going to release it. That's the next slide. All right. The next slide after that is going to be who's doing it, who's the team. So it's, "Hi, our director is so and so. Maybe your producer, maybe it matters. You're probably not going to have any A-list talent, so you're not going to put a star in." So that's what I call the credibility slide. And this could be the single most important slide, because here's the secret. Here's what people don't understand. When you're asking somebody to invest in a low budget indie film, they are not actually investing in your movie. They are investing in you, the filmmaker. People, high net worth individuals, bet on the jockey, not the horse. All right. They're making the bet on you, the filmmaker. They're doing it for a couple reasons. Number one, they think that you're talented and you're actually going to make a good film. So hopefully you are. Hopefully you're a good filmmaker and you're going to make a good film. But number two, They're going to like the plan that you're about to present them about after when you make the good film, how you're going to get it distributed, how you're going to get the money back to them. So you're asking them to trust you. Investing is all about trust. No matter how good an investment sounds, if a if a rich person does not trust you, they're not going to give you the money. And if they do trust you, then no matter how bad the film sounds, they're still going to give you the money. Because guess what? Look at I'm the next thing we're going to talk about is sort of the film. So look at I just said, and a lot of you are thinking, wait a second. He said one slide that has the title of the film, the log line, and the poster, and then we get to when it's going to get made and who's making it. I didn't go into details. I didn't go into the plot points. I didn't go into the mood board. I didn't go into the characterization. I didn't go into that. Why? Because investors don't care. They actually don't care. And if they did, if and when you get somebody who actually does care, they will ask you more questions about that. Maybe they'll be curious. Hey, what's the plot points, or what's the, by the way, I've named 9 feature films. Guess how many investors have ever asked me to read a script? ZB, guess how many investors have asked me to read a script?
I'm guessing be a big fat zero.
Zero. Zero. No investor is going to ever read a script. They don't have the attention span to read the script, and it's not going to matter. And by the way, if an investor does ask you to read the script, it's because they want to use it as an excuse to tell you no, they don't want to invest. They're going to say, oh, well, it sounds good, but I don't like the story. So they're not going to read a script. A real estate person, an investment banker, they don't know how to read a script. A script has no description. It's all dialogue. You have to be an artist. You have to be a script writer, somebody to understand how to read a script. So let's get back to the deck. So now we say the credibility slide, which is here's the team I put together, and don't show more than 3 people on that slide. All right. Even show one. Maybe it's just you. You're the filmmaker, you're the sort of the business person behind it, but you do want to show on that slide that there is a creative element, that meaning that somebody on your team knows how to artistically make a good movie, and there's a business element. Somebody on your team knows how to manage the money, put it together, get distribution properly, and manage the return on investment. So you want to show those 2 things. All right. Slide number 4 or number 3, you could put this out of order, is other comparable films. Now you're going to start saying, okay, this is our team. Now here's the other films of this nature that have done well, to give them sort of a framework. Now, unfortunately, you're going to have to use bigger films than yours, because they don't watch indie films, these people. They only watch big budget films. So for instance, if you're making a horror film, they're going to know the Blair Witch Project, and they're going to know, some people are going to know that the Blair Witch Project was made for $50,000 and made 100 million, and everybody's going to compare it to that. So you could say we would like to do that. So this is the idea, or Paranormal Behavior, or Parasite, or some of these films that are bigger films. And the reason you have to use these films is because they don't know the other indie small films. They've never heard of them. So you have to compare sort of what the idea is, to set the stage of what they're thinking, okay, if we get lucky and we make this kind of film, then we can do what these guys have done. It's just like, you see that building over there? We're going to build a building that looks like that. It's going to be like that big, 50 stories, and we're going to fill it with these kind of tenants. And then you can look at it and visualize it. That's what comparable films are all about. Okay, then the next slide. Now you're going to get into the details of distribution. All right, we've only done 4 slides so far about the movie and about the filmmaker. Now we're going to talk about distribution. All right, so now you're going to say, when we make this great film, here's who we're going to sell it to. Here's the audience that we're going out to, and you're going to explain how you're going to get there. So distribution is basically the process of accessing audiences. So you're going to say, we're going to go through, these 3 streaming platforms. Here's how we're going to get to these streaming platforms, whether it be a distributor, an aggregator, or self-distribution. There's lots of strategies on distribution. So you're going to have probably 2, maximum 3 slides, but it all takes is 2 to say, here's how we're getting it out to the people. Then the next 4 slides are going to be marketing. It's, here's who our target market is once we make this film accessible. So we're going to put it, say, on Tubi, let's say, all right, as a streaming platform, and Amazon. Now, here's there's 60,000 movies on Tubi. So how is ours going to be more popular, more how is ours going to be known out of those 60,000? 40,000 of which are big budget Hollywood films. So it's all about marketing. All right. Now you're going to talk about a marketing campaign to them. And you're going to say, here's the social media marketing campaign we're going out with. Maybe we have some influencers. Here's maybe a direct marketing campaign. This is all about marketing. It's about getting the attention of the audience that you want to get to and driving them to your site. So now you've explained what movie you're making, how you're going to get audiences to have access to it, how you're going to let audiences know about it, create awareness with audiences. So then the next slide is going to be a revenue forecast. When these people, like here's the universe of people that we're going after, say 20 million people, our marketing campaign hopefully will convert 10% of them. So 2 million people, and these people will each spend, a dollar net for the movie. So here's the revenue that we're going to generate from this audience based on this marketing plan. It's a revenue forecast. It's tricky to do a revenue forecast, especially if you don't know what you're doing. Tricky to do all of this if you don't know what you're doing. But this is what, then all of a sudden the investor's thinking, okay, now I see it. Like, think of a real estate investor, okay? Somebody says, I'm going to build an apartment. I'm going to have 1,000 units. I'm going to charge everybody $1,000 a month rent. That's easy math. 1,000 times 1,000, $1 million a month in rent. And we're investing this much. People can think that way. This is the kind of people you're talking to. You got to get them thinking that way. That's what the revenue forecast does. It says, here's how we're going to get the people. Here's how we're going to convert them into paying customers. And here's the amount of money we're going to generate. Okay, so now we've set the stage how much money this thing's going to generate. Now we have to show less the cost. All right, now we have to show what, and so this is how much it's going to generate. And you take off the distribution cost, so it'll be net. This is how much we made it for the budget. Here's what the profit's going to be. So now we know what the profit's going to be. Now we have to set the stage as to what the investment is going to be. All right. So now we say to the investors, okay, so here's what we need from you. So this thing we're going to make for $750,000. We're going to generate $1.5 million. So there's going to be $750,000 paying back the investors, $750,000 in profit, which is 100%. It's 200% return on investment. All right, 100% of the investment back plus another 100% in profit. All right. So how is that profit going to get divvied up? This is very important. This is what we call the investment scenario. All right. So, and how do you want to take the money from the investors? Do you want to take it as an equity investment where basically they invest in your company and or your movie and they own a piece of it? Or do you want it to be a debt investment where they basically lend you the money, you pay them back, and then give them a premium on their payment, like interest and or profit share? So this is very important. Now, I'm going to tell you that for most low budget indie films, like in the range I'm talking about, and this is why I said at the beginning, if it's above $1 million, you're probably going to look at an equity investment. If it's below $1 million, you're probably going to do a debt investment. It's cleaner, it's easier, it's faster, it's safer for the investors. And I could go into a lot of details why if you want to talk about that afterwards. But if that's the case, then you're going to basically say, here's what we're looking for. We're looking for, and I'll just make up some numbers, okay? We need $750,000. All right. So we need 25 people at $30,000 each. All right. That's 750. So a unit is $30,000. We need 25 of them, and we need it by this date. And if you set it up, say, as a debt investment, you say, okay, we're going to take your money, and here's how the water flow fall is going to work. The first money that comes back in on that revenue forecast of $1.5 million, the first 750,000 of it is going to go directly to you, the investors, to pay back your investment. Then thereafter, we're going to do a revenue split. So all of the profit that comes back in, and I'll make it simple. We'll give 50% of it to you guys after you're fully paid back your investment, and 50% to the producers. So 375 to you, 375 to us, clean investment. That's the investment scenario in the deck. All right. Then the next slide would be running that scenario saying, okay, here's what it looks like. Here's the revenue flow. Here's what we call the waterfall. Here's how the money comes in. It comes back to you. Here's what you get as your profit. Your return on investment is 150% in that case scenario, 50% profit. All right. So now the next slide, and that's the sell basically. Okay. The next slide is going to be what I call the risks slide. You need to be very upfront, open, and honest with your investors and say, investing in low budget indie films is a super high risk investment. And here's why most films lose their money. But you're going to say why you're going to offset the cost of the risk. Now, if you're doing tax credits, let's say, that's going to offset. Tax credits, a lot of people treat them as financing. I treat them as revenue. The reason I treat them as revenues can come in a year or two after. So you're not getting them up front unless you're financing against them, which is super expensive on low budget indie films. So if you're getting, say, I don't know, of that 750, let's say you're getting 200,000 of it back from some tax credit type of scenario, then the first revenue that's coming back is that 200,000 is going to them directly. So it's really important to lay out that it's super high risk, but here's how you are mitigating the risk because you've got these certain deals in place. Now, you're not going to have a pre-sale. I mean, you could, but pre-sales are really hard to come by. But the next thing that's the most important thing, or not the most, but equally important on that risk side is then you're going to say, and this is what I suggest you say, okay? Let's say you have these 30 units that you're selling, or sorry, 25 units at 30,000 each, right? You need to say when you're taking people's money, just look at me and listen to what I'm saying. You, the filmmaker, you need to be the first in. You need to be the first in and the last out. So you need to take the first unit. So you need to put down $30,000 of cash of your own money and take the first unit and say to your investors, I'm the first money in, which is the highest risk money, and I'm going to be the last money out. So for $30,000 short on paying everybody back, I'm not going to get paid back. You're going to be ahead of me. That is what we call having skin in the game, and it really creates a ton of credibility with investors because they know that you are taking financial risk. Now, I know what you're all thinking. You're thinking these high net rich worth individuals, these rich people, $30,000 is kind of nothing to them. I mean, they're worth $30 million. So $30,000 is like it's a nice weekend holiday for them. It's nothing. But for me, a starving, indie filmmaker who's only worth $50,000, I'm going to be putting up like more than half of my net worth against this movie. And that's the compelling thing to a rich person. They're thinking, wow, this person really can't afford this. They can't afford to put this kind of money in. Like relative to their net worth, they're putting up like a gigantic component of their net worth against this movie. They're taking way more financial risk relative to their net worth than I am. You know what that says to an investor? It says that you really, really believe in your project and you're willing to put, excuse my French, your ass on the line for it. You're willing to take a lot of risk. Now, hopefully you don't take too much risk because you don't want them to think you're stupid, that you're a kamikaze and you're going to blow your life. But you need to show showing people when you put your own money in and it's a pretty substantial percentage of your net worth, that shows people that you really, really believe in your project and that you're really going to pay attention to it. All right. That's the pay attention money. All right. They say, look at this guy, we don't know him and he's going to take our money and hopefully he's going to pay attention, but he's putting our money ahead of his money. So he doesn't get paid back until we do. And he can't afford to lose that money. He's going to pay attention. This is how people think. This is how investors think. I'm telling you, I've been in front of hundreds of them. And I am an investor, okay? I know exactly how the mentality works. All right, so that's the risk slide. Okay, then we're going to go into two more slides. The fun stuff, the sexy stuff that I talked about before. There's going to be a slide in the deck and it's going to say, hey, if you're thinking of doing another investment, real estate or stocks and bonds or something like that, this is way better. First of all, we're going to show you, I just showed you a 50% return on investment. And by the way, over a certain period of time, say 4 years. Plus, you're going to get all this fun stuff. You're going to get an IMDb credit. You're going to get executive producer credit in the movie. You're going to get this. You're going to get premiere screening. You're going to get tickets to festivals. You're going to get a crew jacket. You're going to have dinner on set with the director. You're going to get a background cameo. You're going to make this fun. You're going to be part of the movie business, and you're going to have fun, and you're going to tell your kids and your family and friends, and they're going to all think you're cool. I'm telling you, it's real. This is real. And then the last slide is thank you very much. Please, thank you for taking the time to consider my investment. Here's my contact info. You make sure you put your email and your phone number on there because you're going to leave the deck with them. That's an investor pitch deck. That's it. Now, I spent 3 slides telling you about the movie and 12 slides or 14 slides, whatever it was, telling you about the distribution, marketing, and investment scenario. That is what when remember I said at the beginning, ZB, you asked me, how the mindset. We're talking business. This is a business proposition. All right. You happen to be making a film, but you're not selling them on the film. You're selling them on the financial investment.